So the best part of any job that you love, including mine, is the people who you get to work with. And in my case, not just the faculty, of course, but the students who become eventually alums. This particular panel was something we were really looking forward to. I've been looking forward to for quite a while. Neal Pilson, first, was the former president of CBS Sports for a decade plus at the helm, and legendary sports broadcasting figure, Sports Broadcasting Hall of Fame, and more selfishly, for our perspective, a faculty member for us back to 2007. And when Neal came to me before the spring 2024 semester, so last spring, and said, "This is it, I'm going to retire," it took me aback a little bit, and I begged him, and he eventually said, "No, we tried to negotiate, and it didn't." So I said, "Well, how can we honor Neal properly?" And then along with that, so we were really fortunate because there was a period of time where Val Ackerman, now the commissioner of the Big East Conference, co-taught a section of the leadership course with Neal Pilson, right? And so can you imagine, as the students, and there are some of you who are in this room who had the honor to be taught by the two of them together, right? And Val, of course, has gone on to become the commissioner of the Big East. And we thought, what a great way to really honor Neal would be to bring Val back to campus and they could have another conversation together. So it is with great pleasure that I get to introduce to you Val Ackerman, the commissioner of the Big East Conference, and Neal Pilson back to the stage. Val, Neal, take it away.
Great. Oh, this is so exciting. So Scott, thank you very much for those kind words and for your leadership. You do a great job here, and you're really performing an incredible service for the sports business. It's truly an honor for me to be here today, back on campus, in no small part to help celebrate the 17-year contributions of my dear friend Neal Pilson to the Columbia Sports Management Program. I want to say again, Scott, thank you so much for giving us this forum and allowing us to have a conversation. I'm going to be asking a lot of the questions here, but we did structure this as a talk. I am now in my 36th year in the sports business. I started when I was 5. I spent the first 16 at the NBA and the WNBA, and I've been at the Big East Conference now for the past 11 years, if you can believe that.
And there's a story to that?
There's a story to that. I left the WNBA in 2005 after 8 years as the first president, really largely so I could spend more time with my family. And for the young professionals in the audience, I would just sort of warn you, this is something you're going to have to figure out. If you want to have a family and you want to have a career in the sports business, there is occasionally tension with the juggling that goes on with trying to do both. And I certainly lived that myself with my 2 daughters who were very young when the WNBA started, now 30 and 32. During the 8 years that followed after I left the WNBA, I really didn't have a plan, but things started to materialize for me. But during that time period, I picked up a portfolio of activities that included, as Scott noted, 4 years in the classroom here at Columbia, co-teaching the leadership class with Neal. We were, I think, a great team. Do you agree? We were a great team. And to be honest, frankly, I learned as much about leadership as any student, simply by being at Neal's side for those 4 years. So Neal, thank you very much for that and for all the memories.
It was my pleasure, and I look forward to this conversation very much. Go ahead.
So I have a few questions for you as we reflect together on the great run that you've had. And we're going to leave some time. I think there's someone here, right, giving me a cue on time left, so we can take some audience questions at the end if there are any. So before we get into your Columbia era, can you maybe just talk for a few minutes about how you got into sports in the first place?
That's an interesting story. Unlike many of you who have selected the sports management course as the vehicle or the avenue to get into sports, I got out of law school with no sports direction whatsoever. I always watched a lot of sports. I played a lot of sports. I felt I knew a good deal more than the average person. But I went to law school, got out of law school, practiced law, and then I had an opportunity to join a television company that was not involved in sports. It was an entertainment company, but they did business with the national networks, of which there were only 3. Imagine this: no ESPN, no Fox, no syndicated programming of much importance, very little cable, and 3 broadcast networks. And we thought we had a difficult job just competing among the 3 of us. But in that position at this company called Metro Media, I negotiated television deals, not sports, with the networks. And when a job opened up at CBS in the business side of television, I took it. It seemed like a good fit. I was sports knowledgeable. I soon got there and realized I knew very little about the business of sports, but I knew a good deal about the television of sports. And this is the first point I'd make. I watched a lot of sports television. I knew what I liked when I watched a television event, sports event, and I knew what I didn't like. So I brought the perspective to network television of the viewer. I didn't know much about production. I didn't know the business deals that were going to be made, but I knew I had confidence in my ability to identify what was good sports television and what wasn't. And that helped me dramatically through my career. So the job opened up at CBS. I was head of business affairs. I practiced law a little bit on the side in terms of some of the legal issues. And then some very dramatic things happened at CBS, which again goes to the point of you really can't plan out your career. You can get ready, you can study, you can do your homework, and then hopefully something will happen that gives you that opportunity to step into a role that you never really planned for. In any case, a whole bunch of people got fired at CBS Sports for a tennis event called Winner Take All Tennis. Don't Google it now. After our conversation, go Google Winner Take All Tennis, where head-to-head matches between Agassi and McEnroe and Connors were televised by CBS and promoted as winner take all. I happen to know, because I negotiated the deals, that the loser got paid as well. Not as much as the winner, but the loser got paid. This turned out to be, interestingly enough, a scandal. We had to go to Washington to explain we did not deliberately mislead our viewers into thinking that the winner got $500,000 and the loser got nothing. I happen to know, because I did the deals, the loser got $150,000. So, and what they did is they punished CBS by giving them what we call a short license on one of their television stations. And the boss came to me, the head of the company, and said, Neal, you got a legal background, you got a business background, you've got to clear everything that we do. It's got to go through you. Even though I was not in the chain of command that ordinarily would approve everything. So I had to approve the promotion, the sales deals, the production planning, and in that role, I took on a large responsibility, and 5 years later, on the 18th hole at Augusta National, we were there for a meeting. Imagine walking out, my boss and I are the only people on the golf course. And he said, Neal, we'd like you to become president of CBS Sports. This was in 1981. So that's a long answer to a very short question. But the point is, I didn't plan for that. I didn't say, you know, I want to be the president of CBS Sports. I was just ready for the advancement opportunity. And that's what leadership skills is all about, being ready when your time comes. And we'll get into that in a few minutes. Let's go.
Okay, so that's a great story. So let's now segue to this opportunity that opened up here at Columbia 17 years ago to teach the leadership class. So I want to talk to you about two things. One, the class is called Leadership Skills. So we can talk a little bit about
that was my choice.
But that's your choice. And then sort of as a segue to that, having been in the classroom with you, I attribute to you a couple of nuggets that I heard you mention time and again during our time together in the classroom. One of them, which I use all the time, is leaders come in all shapes and sizes. We learn from the leaders we work for, but we're not them. You have to be you. And I have a perspective on that. And the other one that I've heard you say time and again is know thyself.
Yes.
So can you, we all have leader tenets, we learn them, we have some of our own when we sit in the leader chair. Can you elaborate on those and talk a little bit about your leadership philosophy in general?
Well, to those of you, and I see some of you in the audience, you've heard this before. Know thyself was the motto of my college, Hamilton College. The premise was, if you don't know yourself and you don't understand why you do things and your thinking and your behavior, you can't manage yourself, which is what you're really doing. You can't manage other people. So we started off in our class, the very first class is all about self-management, knowing yourself, knowing what you like, what you don't like, knowing what you're good at, knowing what you're not so good at. I found that when I was planning the course, and this was a little before Val joined me, and I want to tell a story about how Val came to join me. People who were in leadership in sports, people like Roger Goodell, who's still there, David Stern, who unfortunately has passed, Gary Bettman, Bud Selig. These were the heads of the four big sports organizations. They were all dramatically different people. How was I going to pick from each of them their basic skills and to a certain extent ignore what they didn't do so well? And I thought, I mean, these folks all had integrity. They all had great personal skills.
Great work ethics.
Great work ethics, honest, good presentation, but they were also vastly different. So I thought I'd plan the course bottom up. And again, those who took my course realized that the word granular always came up in the early classes. So many small things determine good leadership. Ultimately, the question I wanted you to be able to ask yourself is not, why did that person get promoted and I didn't? Rather, gosh, I got promoted and all you guys didn't. What was the reason? And the reason is you have demonstrated learned skills over the period of time as you grew in the business that qualified you for management. Management is a big step up. When you're managing yourself, you know, believe it or not, it's relatively easy. The first time you have to manage somebody else, you're in a new career. All of a sudden, your responsibilities get a lot more significant when you're managing another person or two or three or four. And the whole course was simply based on a whole range of skill sets that I felt could be taught. And as I see several of you in the audience, I think you all agree, you should be nodding your head, because that was the other thing. I said, it's very reinforcing for a speaker to look out at an audience and see a couple of people kind of saying, yeah, nodding your head. That's a neat way, but all of a sudden, my entire class started nodding their heads, and I said, no, that's overkill. But I approached the course in a somewhat unique way. There he goes. And I changed the name from leadership to leadership skills, because it's all about skill management and skill acquisition.
So can I share with you my 5 Ds of leadership?
Sure.
Did I ever share this with you? Okay, this is my framework. The 5 Ds, what leaders do and need to do well to stay leaders, okay? Leaders do, it's number 1. Sometimes you have to do it yourself. Number 2, you have to decide.
Yeah, there's a head nodding. That's
Okay,
good. That's
leaders
good. We're
make
making
the decisions.
We're making
Buck
progress.
stops
We've got
there.
at least one person listening. That's good.
And sometimes you don't make a good decision, as those of us in this chair know, and if you do that too many times, the leadership chair is vacant. But leaders have to decide. My 3rd D is sometimes you can delay making a decision.
Don't make a decision until you have to.
Does that resonate?
I see people on the street that I haven't seen in students 14 years. They'll point their finger at me and say, "Don't make a decision until you have to."
Okay,
You
think
don't.
about
You
that.
may not realize how important that is, not only in your daily life, but in your business life.
Number 4 is delegate, okay? Because at some point you can't do it all. You've got to have a good staff around you, you've got to hand things off, and you have to have quality people who can do the job as well or better than you can. And then number 5, my last D, I've come up with the word divide up. And it's my way of describing sometimes you can't do any of that by yourself. You've got to split up the responsibilities. You've got to say, okay, who do I need to bring into this action or this decision? You know, and in my world now, that might involve presidents of my schools or the athletic directors of our schools or our coaches. It can't be just me on a solo mission doing or deciding. So that's been my framework, but I often use the ones that you passed along as well.
Early on, we have a class each year on crisis management. There's another head nod. That's good. You guys are well trained. And that's an interesting class rather early in the semester. And I always wondered, should it be later rather than earlier? But just as my career was based on my ability to manage through a crisis that I got pushed into, but I had training and background, so too I think you will find that at times of crisis, and it may not be business crisis, it could be a family crisis, you have to gather your people, you have to listen, you have to make decisions, but don't make quick decisions. You make the Friday afternoon decisions, not a great idea if you've got all weekend to say, you know, I really should have done this rather than that. So if you can defer a decision and you don't lose any ground doing so, and it may be only a few hours, walk away from it, come back to it. So decision making, important part of leadership.
So let's stay on the topic of skills and talk about, you know, in your judgment, I may weigh in if I have anything to add here. What skills do we think are most important for anybody looking to get to the next level? Not necessarily just to the leader chair, but we've got a lot of young professionals in the audience, people who are maybe at the beginning or middle stages of their careers. What advice do you have for them as they're looking to advance, enter in some cases, or advance in the business?
First skill I would say is be self-aware. Now, self-consciousness is not what I'm talking about. Self-consciousness is where, you know, people are looking at me and maybe I should do this and that. Self-aware is being aware of the impression that you make on someone else. So you have to know your body language, you have to know your vocal presentation skills, your written presentation skills are very important. And you all, those of you who were in my class, you all got papers back with arrows and cross-outs, and don't give me one paragraph on an entire page, space out your thoughts, put the subject matter where it belongs in sentences. And I realized over the 17 years, one of the interesting things was we had quite a few students where English was not their first language. And you had to be sensitive to the fact that, certainly with the first paper, some students were writing in a language that they're frankly not as comfortable with, as they are with the English language. So trying to help them along and trying to explain to students who were strong in English that writing skills are important. Presentation skills, obviously, very important. Vary your presentation. Don't just talk in a language where you're saying the same thing in the same cadence. Emphasize certain things, but be ready, be prepared. Don't go into a meeting without having an agenda, something in your mind, or better still, something you've written that gives you some sense. Even if you're the junior person at a meeting, have a little agenda ready. So at the end of the meeting, if the boss says, okay, thank you, you put your hand on his or her shoulder and you say, next steps. What do we learn from this meeting? Where do we go? What do we do? What's the next step? Very important. Boss will say, oh yeah, that person was following along. So it's a wide range of skills, but many of them are teachable and are learnable. You can pay attention right through your early parts of your career. Watch how other people handle meetings. Where do they sit? How do they run the meeting? Does the boss speak first, or do the folks who work for the boss speak first? I always let everybody else talk first. If you talk first as the boss, you're going to shape the conversation. You don't want to do that. You want to hear what the other folks have every now and then, more than every now and then, very often. Even the junior person in the room will tell you something, I hadn't thought of that.
Great.
Let me tell you how, I need to tell the Val
Let me just
story.
say, is that our time left? That's accurate, okay.
Oh,
So
boy.
make it quick.
All right, real quick Val story.
And then maybe we'll have time for a question.
I was retained by the Big East when they left the old Big East and created a new basketball conference. It was actually initiated by Fox Television. I can tell that story now. We finished the negotiation. We have our deal. I'm meeting with the presidents of the various colleges. Meeting's over. I'm walking out the door, and a whole bunch of people come walking in, athletic directors, other people from the schools. And I said, what's happening? They said, well, we're here to talk about the commissioner. This is a new conference. We don't have a commissioner. I said, oh, turned around, walked back into the room, and I said, let me suggest somebody to you. Highly skilled, USA basketball, NBA, a lawyer. We were, at the time, co-professors. I said, have you thought about Val Ackerman? And they said, oh, that's interesting. And I left the room.
And then I called you the next week.
30 days, a week later, Val gets the phone call. So she was, to me, the best chance, the best opportunity for the Big East. And it turned out well.
Yeah, and it was crazy because that was the time when the old Big East was disintegrating and had reconfigured. And Neal and I, we would use in the classroom real-life examples to help teach the leadership skills that Neal mentioned. And I remember sitting in the classroom saying, how are these guys going to do this? They wanted to start as a new conference on July 1st, so they had no lead time to get things going.
No office, no staff, nothing.
And sure enough, I was hired on July 1st for a conference that was getting going on July 1st, so it really was.
And I lost my co-professor.
Yeah, it was quite a leadership challenge.
Yeah.
But thanks for putting in the good word. Now it's 11 years later, and I'm 6'5" when I took the job, and now I'm 5'9". Anyway, we have time. Maybe I'll just check and see if there's time. Maybe we can take one question. I don't know if
Where's Scott?
And if not, I know a few students had submitted some questions through the management program, and I'm happy to talk to folks offline if need be.
Scott's disappeared on us. I think he's...
Scott disappeared? All right, so then if no questions, yes, right here in the middle.
Go ahead.
Please.
Hi, yes, my name's Andrew Filio. I'm a grad student here in higher ed. We see sports, they have a big impact on leadership and developing student athletes, but we see a big issue with student athletes actually applying these skills into the professional field after they graduate because they have time commitments with their athletics, they're not getting internships like non-student athletes. How, as the commissioner of the Big East, do we address this issue to help student athletes take that next step after?
You might need to repeat that.
Well, I'll repeat it.
You heard
The question had to do with...
We're going to run over. That's the
Well,
prerogative.
let me answer the question here, and
just
then
by
they
a
can
little
kick
bit.
us off. So the question had to do with how can athletes, student athletes who spend so much time either in the classroom or on the field of play, how can they apply these leadership skills when they're in school in a way that will help them get a head start when they finally get out? And I will say, having been a student athlete myself, I played basketball at the University of Virginia.
I played basketball at
And Neal
Hamilton
played
College as Division III,
But everything we learned,
Division I athlete here.
everything we learned was very applicable to real life. I mean, the time management skills, being part of a team, the work ethic that we referenced earlier, setting a goal, dealing with adversity is a big part of being a leader, because sometimes you don't get it right and sometimes you can fail spectacularly, and you have to pick yourself up the next day and sort of move on and get it right the next time. So I really do think those real life lessons are applicable. You know, is there some catching up to do because maybe you didn't get that internship or get your semester abroad or the other ways that you learn how to be a good citizen and a future business leader? Yes, there's some making up of lost time, but the skills that you get, nonetheless, I found are invaluable and very much transferable.
I agree. We'll go quickly here. Elected captains of school athletic teams, I think, have really passed the first test of leadership. They've been elected by their peers to be captain. In many cases, coaches pick captains, but still, the same criteria for picking a captain is giving a promotion. So yes, school athletes, even if you're not captain, the discipline required. We had an NFL player in our class quite a few years ago, and his self-work ethic and discipline was really extraordinary. So yes, athletics, captainships, leadership roles in school, in clubs, whatever, important. It's all part of the building process. How much? I'm still looking for.
I think we're probably getting the high sign here, Neal. But I think
All
on
right.
that note, I just want to thank you.
I'll tell you what. Well, I don't know. There's one more. That's nicely.
One more?
She was a nodder,
Okay.
so she gets.
All right. So I'm.
Go ahead. One more,
we'll take
Scott.
One more.
Are leaders born or made? They are made. Leadership is not generic. You may be handsome, you may be tall, you may have all sorts of skills, but if you don't study the art of leadership, you don't get there. So leaders are definitely made. Definitely made, and see, leaders get the wrong word out from time to time, but no question, made.
There you go. All right, can we give it up for Neal Pilson, 17 years, Columbia Sports Management Program, one of the great leaders in sports.
Oh.